Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, a podcast where we talk about movies through an anti-capitalist lens. My name is Frank.
And I'm Rivka.
And this is a brand new, very exciting week for the two of us. So we've officially launched a Patreon account, which is where you, our wonderful listeners, can head on over to find all of our stuff, all the Movies vs. Capitalism content. We'll have all of our premium episodes over there. Anytime we do new bonus content, that's where you'll be able to find it. We're going to get like the chats up and running so we can, maybe even a Discord at some point, so we can communicate directly with our listeners. But yeah, this is a cool new addition. So if you want to support the show, we highly recommend you go check out our Patreon and sign up for a subscription. And we should also let everyone know that this show, Movies vs. Capitalism, is no longer a production of The Lever. We are extremely, extremely grateful to The Lever and to David Sirota for giving us the launching pad. But as of now, this is going to be an independent production. So if you want, you can head on over to our Patreon, and the link for that is right in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
Yeah, you said it all, Frank. It's exciting. I am a fan of Patreon because that's, I subscribe to a lot of different podcasts that I enjoy there. So it's exciting to know that now we will be available for all of you to show some support if you can and you desire to. So I guess we'll jump into our plugs here and then we'll get into the show. Because as you know, we don't sell ads on this show. What that means is that we rely completely on our community to help support us keep the show going. And just, we say this every week, but I want to get just a little bit more specific since this is our transition time, that Frank and I really do, it's just us who do the labor to make this show keep running. Of course, we have our amazing guests every week, but we divide the labor between the two of us. We both take turns. Well, now Frank has been editing the show, the audio for the show. I'm learning, and so I'm going to take on some of that now. We do our social media. We do our booking of guests. There's a lot of...
We watch the movies.
We watch the movies, which, believe it or not, I mean, I will say coming in, I was like, that'll be the easiest part. It's a lot of... We love it, but it is the necessary labor that it takes to put this show together. And so we do rely... Most shows would sell ads, and that would pay for that. Again, we don't... That's not in our value system, and we decided that when we came together to make this show. So that is what your $5 a month subscription would go towards. And
yeah, we bumped it down from $8.
Ooh, we bumped it down from $8. You can, of course, you'll notice if you go to our page, there are different tiers, if you will. If $8 was something you felt comfortable with, is possible, but $5, it also gives you access on our Patreon now to our entire back catalog of bonus episodes if you join. So all of those premium episodes, Frank moved them onto there, which was, again, a lot of labor and effort, but you will be able to get those, and then you'll get all of our premium episodes moving forward, which is something that we both talked about wanting to invest even more time and effort. We have been, but just more time and effort into. So again, you can get all of that at our Patreon.
And we're going to be doing even more, one-off movie premium episodes on our Patreon. So effectively, we're just going to be doing an extra episode or two every month, talking about movies. So if you want to get even more of us talking about movies, that's where you got to go now.
And it's a great way. You will automatically become part of our, I think we'll if you sign up, you become part of our mailing list and our community. And I just want to underscore that again, that part of what's been such a joy of creating the show is the community building and getting to build relationships with people who have been listening and sharing their politics with us and writing it about their thoughts on films. And so that to me is something really exciting about the potential of this Patreon and this Discord, is building that conversation and inviting more of a dialogue with our audience in.
And again, the link for that is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com. Also, if you want to help us out for free, you can subscribe and leave a rating and review for this show on your podcast player, which boosts the algorithm and gets the show in front of more people. And it's extremely helpful. So thank you, everyone who's written a review, and thank you, everyone who will do so in the future. So we wanted to chat a little bit before we get into our interview about Face Off, because there's been some pretty huge news. We're recording this on Monday, February 26th, and we wanted to talk about yesterday. There was a U.S. serviceman, I believe he was in the Air Force, a man named Aaron Bushnell. I believe he was 25 years old. Some of you may have heard about this, but if not, it's a fairly graphic story, just a heads up. But this guy, Aaron Bushnell, yesterday on Sunday, went in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., and as a form of protest against Israel's war in Gaza, Aaron self-immolated. And, you know, as you can imagine, the coverage of this is very graphic. It's very upsetting. But something that is very important as a part of this is Aaron's explanation and justification for why he chose this form of protest, to protest the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And he was very, very clear-eyed about this. If you've read any coverage, I'll read a little bit of his statement that he made. He said, quote, "I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest. But compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." And then it's reported that as Aaron self-immolated, he chanted "Free Palestine" until he was no longer able to. And very sadly, we learned today that Aaron succumbed to his burns and is no longer with us. So I know that this is a little bit of a deviation from normal, media conversation, entertainment conversation, but we felt that it actually kind of was, because we wanted to talk a little bit about
and of course, I think, just to add in, this show is about media, it's about politics, right? So
yes, of course,
so of course we're going to keep talking about this. I don't know, as you read those words, I've been thinking about Aaron's words all day, and the last part just struck me. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. And I think, I've been attending and facilitating different grief groups for Gaza, which has been a community that's been really essential to part of my activism in this. And something that people are grieving is this dystopic reality which makes sense, as we know that divide between the ruling class and the working class and the elite class, and that economic divide, but also the cultural divide and the division of reality. It's so profound now and we see this in our media and the representation, to watch all of these events occurring as if, particularly in our music and our films, these events occurring as if nothing else is happening, or as if two things can be true at once. And of course that's true, but that they're not going to merge. It's just, there's so much, I don't know if gaslighting is the right term. I think there's a certain level of that, but just I don't even have the right words, but there's such a deep grief in that people are feeling. And this unbelievably courageous act that I wish never had to happen, but it is part of revealing it. This is part of what I hear in those words, is that the desire was to reveal this to us, particularly on American soil, where this illusion has taken such hold. And I'm thinking again about the ruling class and how that manifests in our entertainment culture and our celebrity culture. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. And how, and we were talking about how there's a fight within these unions, which we've spoken a lot about throughout the summer. SAG-AFTRA has not made a statement. DGA has not made a statement. There's a lot of internalized conversations, groups pushing for them to make a statement one way or the other. I do want to point out that that the Animation Guild, IATSE Local 839, is now the first one of Hollywood's unions to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So while these might just seem like words, like discourse, it is part of trying to rip down the walls of this illusion that the normalization of the ruling class, which I think which Aaron was speaking to. And you and I were talking about this a little. I saw some discourse about this on someone's TikTok, but it's really profound. I've been helping a friend work on her story, which has a lot to do with her role in the 60s with the Black Panthers. And so much of that world was about like Jimi Hendrix and Bob Dylan and the music of the time, and how actually the music of the time made her aware of this story and got her radicalized. And it's really also so profound how if you were just to listen to the music of our time right now and watch the films of our time right now, and that was the only access you had to, like, looking back based on like the mainstream music, you would have no fucking idea what was going on. Where in the 60s, you would listen to Dylan, you would listen to Hendrix. That music was reflective of what was happening at the time.
Yeah, protest music. That was politically charged protest music. That's a huge part of music of that era, of the late 60s and early 70s. From everyone from, like you're saying, Bob Dylan to Bruce Springsteen. It was very regular to see musical artists, engage in some sort of protest or even just speaking their opinion through the use of their art.
And I think that speaks to just the stage of capitalism where it's pushed it so far that artists might even if an artist is speaking out, that it's not even going to be part of the music, but that's separate. That's an outlet. That's not to say there aren't artists doing this and there aren't artists using their voices. I'm talking about the Grammys.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You couldn't hear a damn song there that was reflective of anything. And I don't know why music is what's coming to mind because it was so influential in the 60s. And I think this act is making me think about that. But
it makes a lot of sense. And what has been happening in Gaza has been normalized to the point where everyone else who's actually seeing what is happening for what it is, we've talked about on the show, it makes you feel crazy. It makes you feel crazy because all of the powers that be, the ruling class, has decided this is normal. So whether you are, actress Melissa Barrera who speaks out and loses your job on the screen movie. Nope, you're not allowed to say that. Whether it's Rashida Tlaib in Congress saying from the river to the sea, nope, she's the only member of Congress that has been censured, even though a Republican House member literally just said something along the lines of slaughter them all, but there's no recourse to someone like that. And when this level of violence is not only perpetrated, but is then normalized by our politicians, by our media, it leaves you feeling like you are crazy and like there's nothing to do. And I've been seeing a lot of people write about this unbelievable sacrifice that Aaron made, and self-immolation is the greatest form of protest. It is sacrificing your own life in a way that is unignorable. We're 4+ months into this conflict and
into this genocide,
and I'm personally at a loss for words right now because I know you and I have been on the roller coaster, and I should say on the roller coaster of being comfortable Americans who live within the empire, but like the roller coaster of watching this happen, watching our government be complicit in this, being in the streets, calling our representatives, feeling like there have been moments that, maybe the tide was turning, maybe people are actually starting to listen, and then just finding ourselves back on this hamster wheel of violence. And what you said was perfect. I wish we weren't in a situation where he had to do what he did, or where he felt like he had to do what he did. But the fact that he did, that is, I don't think there's a greater form of selflessness than that.
No, there's not really much else to say other than free Palestine.
Yeah, free Palestine. All right, well, it is time to get on to our interview for today.
I think you're really going to enjoy this interview. It was one of my favorites. Just a quick heads up, we had some audio issues. You probably won't really even notice, but if you do, we apologize.
My bad. Got to check the mics better before recording. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Madeline Pendleton talking about Face Off. Today we are joined by Madeline Pendleton. Madeline is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, I Survived Capitalism, and All I Got Was This Lousy T-Shirt. She's the host of the podcast Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, and the founder of the worker-centered clothing brand Tunnel Vision. Madeline, welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited to have you on. Frank, I think, booked you as a guest, but I knew you because you've been popping up all over my TikTok, particularly with Tunnel Vision. Will you just jump in and tell us about your clothing brand? Because it's very cool. I know our audience is going to be very into everything that you do.
Yeah, so I have a clothing brand that I've run for 12 years. Sorry, I have a dog on my lap also. So
That's all right.
She's sleeping right now.
A cat might pop up at some point on my end, so pet-friendly podcast.
Okay, great. So I've run Tunnel Vision for 12 years now, and I have tried various different ways to make it like a worker-centered business, and some of them failed early on, but our current model that we operate from usually gets people pretty interested. The main thing that's different about our business is that everybody who works at the company, from me, I am the legal sole owner, but that's mostly just because it makes it easier for us to access financing, and the other workers aren't ready to merge into a co-op yet, but I tell them they will have to eventually. But yeah, everybody for me is the legal sole owner, all the way down to an intern. We all earn the exact same take-home pay per day work. And we have a standard 4-day work week, which is 28 hours. And we also have a break-even model where we aim not to profit beyond just, there's like a difference in business. It's really boring, but it's gross profit versus net profit. So we do the gross profit, right, which just pays for our business to basically exist. And the net profit is usually what owners would siphon off for themselves as part of their pay. We aim for a break-even model. We don't strive to have any profit. But one year we actually accidentally ended up with a lot of profit, and we just distributed it up amongst all the workers equally. And everybody voted to use a huge chunk of it to buy everybody who worked at the company a new car because their cars were in bad shape. So
oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we get to vote on, we have workplace democracy. So that would be a big thing we voted on, for example. What do we want to do with this money?
That is the only version of you get a car.
You get a car. You get a car. I mean, it was really fun. And there was this moment where I was on my 6th car purchase of the month. And I went to buy this car, and all of the salespeople are really condescending, especially me. I'm I'm 5'2", and I have wacky blue hair and fishnet tights on. And they're like, okay, little one, what are you doing here? And when it came time to pay, I just plopped down an Amex Platinum card. And they were like, do you need to call first to make sure this will go through? And I was like, it'll go through. And I'm like, oh, I get how rich people get so evil. It's kind of fun to be I can just spend money. But, the company was spending money to buy one of our workers a car. So a little different, I guess.
Can I ask how many years you've had this model, this profit-sharing democratic model?
Yeah, so this current model, I think, has operated for around 6 years.
Wow.
Before that, the other models we tried were still based in socialist theory, but they were harder to implement within a system of capitalism. We tried 1 year, for example, where I tried to kind of take the worker co-op idea and the idea of the workers owning the means of production, right? And I made it really literal. The company sells clothes. So we ran it kind of as this cooperative movement where for all the hours you put into work, you were allowed to sell whatever you wanted on the website. And then a portion of all of our sales individually would go to pay the overhead of the company, and the rest we just kept. Which sounds good in theory, but in a free market system, what ended up happening is that I accidentally created macro girl boss culture. It just became a nightmare where all of a sudden everybody had to be hyper aware of market trends at all times. And then you add this really unequal distribution of pay because some people were just inherently more hip with the market and knew what would sell. So you had people working the same amount of hours, and some were making next to nothing, and some were making way more than everyone else. And I was like, oh, okay, this is just not working. So that was one example of another system we tried in the past, still rooted in socialist theory, but it took us time to find our footing with which one made the most sense, given the fact that we have to exist within the walls of free market capitalism around us.
That is so cool. I love hearing about the process and that there's a process to trying it out. And exactly like you're saying, it's theory until you try it out. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about in terms of how we try out new ways of making theater, making film, that it really is, you have to be willing to sort of mess it up a little bit and figure out what works and what doesn't. And it's great to hear an example of it eventually reaching success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have tried so many things that have failed. I wish I could go back in time with all the knowledge I have now. It would make life so easy. But the current system we have, I feel like it's a more humane approach because it recognizes intrinsically that not everybody is capable of doing the same tasks. Everybody's labor and skill set will be different, but all people are valuable, even if their contributions can't be equal 100% of the time.
It's amazing and it's incredible. And these models are so crucial, especially today. And it's so important to have a model when someone says to you, socialism doesn't work. And you can actually point to people, to organizations, to businesses, whatever, and be like, nope, there it is. There it is. There it is working just fine. So maybe like once we see more models like this, we can start moving past that part of the conversation.
Yes. A thing I always tell people is that our business could fail at any moment. Businesses love to fail. But if it does, it will never be because of how we distributed payroll. Absolutely. That is not an issue our business faces. All the issues that we have to deal with are based on competing in the free market, which we don't get to control. So,
well, I cannot wait to hear how your mind dissects this film you chose for us to watch. But we did decide before we started recording that we will be calling this a film. This is not a movie. This is a film.
It is a film.
We are talking about Face Off, directed by John Woo, written by Mike Werb and Michael Kaleri, starring John Travolta, Nick Cage, Joan Allen, Gina Gershon, and Alessandro Nivola, and also Margaret Cho. Budget for this film was $80 million, which seems, I don't know, in my head that seems low. This is so epic, but the budget was $80 million and it made $245 million worldwide. And quick recap for everyone, in order to foil a terrorist plot, FBI agent Sean Archer assumes the identity of the criminal mastermind Castor Troy through facial transplant surgery. But when Castor wakes up prematurely, he steals Sean's face and assumes his identity, pitting the two men against each other in a game of cat and mouse and faces. Frank wrote that synopsis, and I hope I sold the ... and faces.
I felt an ellipses in my bones. Yep.
Truly, you did. Yeah. My favorite thing, too, is that we get the titular line. We get face off like 4 times in one scene. In the middle of the surgeries happening. So that's how you know it's a really good film, is when you get to hear the title of the film 4 times back to back within like a 30-second span.
Really to just drive the concept home. If you didn't know this, we're going to be switching faces in this movie.
Right. And it has 2 meanings because they're facing off against each other while taking each other's faces off. So that's it's smart. I know it's a very academic kind of a high-end film to really wrap your head around. I'm aware.
I did not pick up on that. That's really impressive. You should actually host this podcast instead of me. I'm embarrassed. All right, so a little bit of historical context for when this film was released. Released on June 27th, 1997. This is the same year as the movies Titanic and Good Burger, which we have also covered on this podcast. Bill Clinton just began his 2nd term as president. In February, a Santa Monica jury finds O.J. Simpson civilly liable for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. In March, 24-year-old rapper Notorious B.I.G. is killed in a drive-by shooting shortly after leaving a party in Los Angeles. Also in March, 39 of the Heaven's Gate cultists commit mass suicide at their compound in San Diego. In June, during a boxing match in Las Vegas, Mike Tyson bites off part of Evander Holyfield's ear. In September, the URL google.com is registered by Google. The median household income is $37,000. A first-class stamp is 32 cents, and a gallon of gas is $1.23.
Wow.
You know what? In reading all that, the mid-90s were like, Bill Clinton's president, neoliberalism is here to stay. All we have to worry about is like guys biting off other guys' ears during a boxing match. Like that's the most important thing that we got to worry about right now.
I mean, I am a little shocked actually just hearing how much was packed into that 1 year. Because I feel like that was my whole childhood, but it really just happened at the same time Face Off came out. So This is really mind-blowing to me.
So why did you choose this film for us to watch?
This film.
So Face Off is my favorite film because I'm a person of class and taste and distinction, obviously. But no, this is a movie I grew up watching. I watched this movie with my dad, speaking of the childhood things. And, you know, it just really is in this like core memory of my brain is watching types of movies like this. It's Con Air, it's Face Off, it's kind of propaganda, but then also there's this weird kind of subtext wherein the criminals are humanized. And I would say we've never seen a villain as intriguing as the villain in this movie, right? Castor Troy.
Sure.
Like he has charisma. He is revolting. He is appealing. He is everything all at once. And one of the things I really like about these like generic action movies from the 90s is that like we see in this movie, we never actually quite understand what type of terrorism Castor Troy is doing and why. There's like a vague reference to North Korea. Like I have seen this movie hundreds of times and I still don't understand the full scope of the plot. Like, as far as I can tell, North Korea is paying Castor Troy $10 million to blow up LA, but that's like all kind of, that's an aside. It doesn't even really matter what type of bad guy he is. Like, the scope of his badness is more in his character than his actions. And I think that this is like something we could not get away with in movies today, you know?
Oh, no.
Yeah, as long as something blew up in the 90s, we were happy. And I think it was a simpler time in many ways. And that's why I have such a fondness for this movie. It's like, it doesn't matter. North Korea is mentioned once. It's a throwaway line. We hear something about $10 million, maybe. But really, the point is just to watch Nicolas Cage and John Travolta pretend like they are each other. And there is beauty in that simplicity.
Oof, loved all that. It was my first time. Was this a first time for you, Frank, or was I the only
No,
one?
I have seen this movie before. It had been a little while, but yeah, I had seen it.
A few times? Or like, was this something you watched a lot or?
Yeah, this was something that would occasionally be on like a buddy's house at a sleepover, or
Yeah.
you know, you'd catch some of it on, you know, the USA network, except it would be, you know, censored and or like cut for TV, and you'd be like, well, this isn't fun. Then none of the truly depraved stuff is in this. But yeah, I'd seen it a few times.
I was busy cutting out pictures of Leonardo DiCaprio and making earrings to sell. Like, I was full on in my Titanic phase when I clearly should have been in my Face Off phase. Who would I have been if I was cutting out pictures of Nick Cage on one ear and John Travolta on the other?
You'd be me, I think. Yeah, because when I saw this movie for the first time, I was like, this is it. This is as good as film can get. Nothing can trump this. Like, I was immediately taken with this as a child. And my friends today often make fun of me because they're like, all you need for a movie to be enjoyable is for things to explode. And I'm like, this movie has so many explosions. We have the constant threat of explosion. We have, at one point, maybe a boat blows up. There is a boat chase inexplicably at the end of this movie. It's just nonstop quality entertainment. And again, like the only movie I could think of that's as entertaining, I think, is Con Air.
It's all real, tangible. Like, it's not special effects. I think I read that it was supposed to be more sci-fi, and John Woo was like, no, I won't do sci-fi. I'm not good with special effects. It has to be all real things being blown up. And it's epic.
The original script was originally set in space, I read in my research. Wow. And John Woo was like, that's unbelievable. Everything else we're doing in this movie, totally plausible, but going to space, that is a bridge too far for us.
Well, you know, the United States, we're not the best at our space travel. So I think that was maybe John Woo is realistic. It's not one of our strong suits.
But we have some great plastic surgeons.
Yeah.
And that's believable.
That's believable.
But Madeline, this film has, you know, 1 million explosions. It also has two of the most unhinged film performances that I can recall. Like I like John Travolta and Nick Cage in this movie are living on another planet.
Brilliant.
With like how big and ridiculous and truly unbelievable their performances are. If you've never seen this movie, you would watch these guys and you would say like, oh, well, that's wrong. Like, that's incorrect acting. And you would be correct. But somehow it works in this ridiculous heightened film that John Woo has set up here.
I mean, it's really an exploration in surrealism at a certain point. The whole movie. There actually is a scene where the main character, John Travolta, he's the good guy. This is a real movie where we have good guys and bad guys, right? So we've got John Travolta's daughter, Jamie, at one point has just been vaguely sexually harassed by the villain wearing her dad's meat suit. And she is noticeably shaken and she collapses into her mother's arms and she goes, "What planet am I on?" And that really summarizes the entire movie. Yeah. The acting is so over the top. There's like these scenes that haunt me in my dreams. We've got Nicolas Cage pretending to be John Travolta being him. Right? Which is that I get so lost in who is pretending to be whom and when. So there's this scene where Nicolas Cage is looking in the mirror maybe, and he's having this meltdown and he's just yelling, "I'm Castor Troy," over and over again. And you've never seen something so melodramatic in your life. And in that moment, you feel for him. You feel for Agent Sean Archer. And I think the overacting really helps remind you who is who, because it's so easy to lose track of what's actually happening here. So it truly is just a different planet that we're on now.
It's so interesting that you say that, because that was one of the things, as I was looking at it through the lens of politics, that I was most drawn to, was this feeling of getting lost in who's pretending to be who. Like you said, we kind of go in with a clear sense of who the good guy and who the bad guy is, even though their politics and the reasons that they are good guys and bad guys are only because they told us that. We don't really know why anyone's a good guy or a bad guy. And so then when they switch faces and there's this just like constant anxiety of like who's who, it's like this massive gaslighting. This is what it feels like to be in our current climate politically in the US, when you have a political party like the Democrats and the Republicans constantly saying like, we're the good guys and you're the bad guys and you're this, but they keep doing things that are so similar, having such similar policies. And it just feels like, oh, we are the Joan Allen, we're the wife and the daughter. And like Nick Cage and John Travolta are the Republicans and the Democrats, and they're just face switching. And ultimately, like, it doesn't matter, because there is this in this film, the only reason someone's good is because the movie's like, oh, remember, they're good.
Yeah, I like this a lot. One of the things that I found interesting is that both Sean Archer, who's our good guy, he's the FBI agent, right? He's the counter-terrorist covert unit that at one point he says is so covert, you snap your fingers and nothing happens. He is full of critiques in this movie of the federal government. He, at one point, makes a critique of the CIA. He, at one point, makes a critique of the Fourth Amendment. He, at one point, makes a critique of the LAPD. So we see Sean Archer is not happy with the system that he is operating within, right? But he is supposed to be our good guy, the law man. But the whole time, he's critiquing the law. He's critiquing the government. He's critiquing the federal government. And then we have Castor Troy on the opposite end, who is doing the exact same thing. But the only difference that we see as consumers of this media between the two is that Castor Troy is having fun with it and Sean Archer isn't. And the thing I really like, in a lot of ways, I think this is an anti-carceral movie. This is what I take from it.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, when Sean Archer is forced to go live as Castor Troy, he befriends all of Castor Troy's old friends. And you really see like the criminals, the bad guys, the lines start to blur here, because you see the criminals and bad guys presented as human for the first time. Early on, we see the scene of Sean Archer, FBI agent, hassling this woman, telling her, I'm going to get your kid taken away from you, which I think is an excellent reference point to how CPS, Child Protection Services, often operates adjacent to policing, right? We see this. He's like, I'm going to take your kid from you. And this is a tool to get her to comply with the federal government. And this takes us to that whole idea where like CPS are cops too. And then when he's undercover, he really sees her humanity and he learns more about her. And we kind of see that she actually is Castor Troy's on again, off again girlfriend. She's probably a victim of domestic abuse in some way. She has a son with Castor Troy. We learn that he's the father of her son. And at the end of the movie, Sean Archer tells her, whatever happens, Sean Archer is off your back for good, because he's humanized her and he's seen she's not just a bad guy. She's this complicated three-dimensional character who's had her own struggles in her life that led her to be in this position. And another person he does this with is her brother, who is also part of Castor Troy's crew, Dietrich, right? And we hear the throwaway line about North Korea. They're like, oh, well, Dietrich's deal with North Korea. And he's supposed to be this bad guy. But there's a scene during a shootout where we see this tender moment of him with his nephew. They put headphones on the nephew during a shootout, so he's not listening to, I would say, thousands of people dying. It's just one of the most epic shootout scenes ever. But he goes to his nephew and he's like, you're like so brave. You got this, little buddy. You're doing great. So we really see that Sean Archer, when he is forced to see how the other half lives, the criminals, the villains, the bad guys amongst us, he sees that they have these individual stories that brought them to this point where they are. And I think in that way, we as the audience learn that who is good and who is bad. It is arbitrary. It's arbitrary based on the environment you grew up in, based on the community you keep, based on what you have to do to survive. And we don't know much about Castor Troy's backstory, but his brother, Pollux Troy, is a central character in the film as well. And we know that Castor is a caretaker for his brother. He ties his shoes for him. He makes sure he gets his medication. And I would say Pollux Troy is heavily autistically coded, I would think.
Sure.
You know, so we see that whatever happened in their childhood, Castor was forced to be this caretaker for his brother. And so the thing I like about this movie is I think that it is a movie of Sean Archer realizing that the carceral system, one, vilifies people who probably just need better access to resources, and prison doesn't change them. Anybody, too, who goes into prison doesn't come out reformed. They come out more aggressive, more angry, more ready to commit crimes because they have fewer resources. And three, when he actually talks to these people, they aren't just absent-minded bad guys. There's humanity there. There's a scene in prison where he actually recruits another criminal to try to help him escape. And when they're escaping, he tries to save this guy's life and the guy falls to his death. And he seems genuinely upset about it. He realizes this was a good man. He just was in a bad place at a bad time and ended up here. And another thing too that I think about the carceral thing that goes in with this is when Sean Archer is forced to live as a prisoner in the super high security prison where they all wear magnet shoes.
That felt like a leftover from the space concept.
I mean, I'm glad he did because truly phenomenal. But yeah, when he's in Magnet Shoes fake space prison, the guards tell him, like, the Geneva Convention doesn't exist here. Nobody knows you are here. Like, your ass is mine. Like, whatever I say goes. And I've had friends who are incarcerated and they describe these similar situations where you're like, I am not viewed as human. It doesn't matter who I am. It doesn't matter if I was wrongfully convicted. Like Sean Archer's in there undercover. He's an innocent man. It doesn't matter who's innocent, who's guilty, the nature of your crimes. Once you're in prison, whatever that prison guard, not elected, not representing the people, just some guy who got hired for the job, whatever he says goes. And I think that Sean Archer realizes this. He's an innocent man in prison. And he's like, oh, I have no recourse. My only option is to become a criminal myself to escape this. So I think it says a lot about like the inevitability of like rebelling against the carceral system and how oppressive it is.
Damn. Okay.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, thank you. That was like college dissertation level analysis. Thank you.
Hence this film.
Hence the film.
It's a film. Yes.
I'm glad you touched on the stuff with Sean Archer, him utilizing the state for this obsession of his, which is to catch Castor Troy. One thing we haven't mentioned is that the reason Sean Archer is so obsessed with catching Castor Troy is because Castor Troy murdered Sean Archer's like 5-year-old son in the first scene of the movie. But you're right. He wants all of the functions of the state to basically bend to his will the entire time. He's always upset when the state isn't acting fast enough to, just pursue his blind obsession. And I think this has a lot to say about like what the destructive obsession is afforded to men in power, especially in an agency like the FBI. Makes me think of someone like J. Edgar Hoover, who basically was like using the FBI to do his own personal bidding. And Sean Archer is basically the same person when we are introduced, and he's pissed when the FBI isn't moving fast enough to, circumvent the judiciary or other legal proceedings to try to catch this guy. And you're right, there's a really sharp contrast between the two of them because, like, Archer is the quote-unquote good guy, but he's the shittier person, maybe. Like, he's a shitty boss, he's a shitty husband, he's a shitty father. But then on the other side, you have Castor Troy, who, as you're saying, is like a really loving caretaker to his brother, and then has this really supportive community of international terrorist criminal friends. So it does a really good job of sort of flipping these dynamics on their head and making you look at who is writing these labels and why they get assigned to these different groups.
Yeah, it is really interesting to see too that Castor Troy, when he is wearing the Sean Archer skin suit, becomes a better husband and father than Sean Archer ever was. He listens to his wife, his not real wife, obviously. He pays attention to what she needs. He prioritizes her. The daughter, the teenage goth daughter, right? He protects her from being sexually assaulted from a date in a car in front of their house. And he gives her a knife and is like, this is how you defend yourself. So in a lot of ways, yeah, we see that the bad guy is better at moving through community spaces than this quote unquote good man is. Now, a thing I picked up on politically, though, that was interesting is that both utilize the patriarchy in different ways. Both are viewing women as objects. The difference is that Sean Archer, our good guy, he is viewing his wife and his daughter as things to be protected, right? It's a very patriarchal control based thing. He doesn't see their humanity. That's why he's such a bad husband and father. He can't pay attention to what they need. He just knows that it's his duty to protect them as his prized objects, right? But on the flip side, Castor Troy, the way he interacts with women throughout the movie is he is just overtly sexually aggressive to all women. There's actually a funny bit in there that seems to be kind of mocking the church because Castor Troy is dressed up as a priest.
Unbelievable shit.
It's a fantastic scene. And he's being vile and grotesque while wearing this like Catholic priest outfit to the extent that he approaches what looks to me like a teenage girl, like a child, like a teen.
Definitely a teenage girl, yeah.
Yeah, and he like gropes her very aggressively and nobody bats an eye as he's doing this. And to me, that's a nice little aside where you're like, these institutions, like the institution of the FBI, the institution of the United States, the institution of the Constitution, the institution of the carceral system, the institution of the church, these all seek to harbor bad men and protect them. So when Castor Troy moves as a villain through the Catholic Church, and it's only in the title scene we see this, it's only a few seconds, nobody bats an eye because this is apparently normal priest behavior.
Sure.
Which I think is very fascinating. So I think there's a lot of critiques of just like systemic institutions in this movie. And I don't even know if the movie's aware it is critiquing them, but it's happening constantly.
Yeah, I would agree. I want to dig into the character of Jamie a little bit more. As you mentioned, she's sort of this punk American daughter. My favorite intro to her is how they make reference to that she's getting bullied because we know it's how she dressed, and she turns around in this close-up and has this incredible eye makeup on, but it's a great shot. And he says to her, you change your hair and makeup every week. Who are you supposed to be? And she says, I'm supposed to be me, not like you have a clue who I am anyway. And then later it's addressed to her when Castor Troy becomes her dad, is dressed, like you said, in the skin suit of her father. And there is this really creepy exchange where he comes on to her. And the one thing it just made me cringe so much was how she kind of liked getting the attention from dad. Like there was like this weird incestuous, like her character didn't get any agency of like, ugh, what? And he says to her, dress up like Halloween and ghouls will try to get in your pants. And then at the end of the film, she's like returns to sort of your all-American girl, no makeup, no Halloween costume. So I'm just curious what you thought of the messaging of the character of Jamie.
Yeah, I love Jamie as a character. I think it is interesting. Yeah. So at first, when she notices a change in her dad's behavior, it is kind of weirdly sexually charged, but you can see that she is more intrigued just that, yeah, her dad is humanizing himself to her. So I don't think she initially is picking up on the sexually charged nature of the dynamic, but at the end, when it goes full blown, John Woo, boats are chasing each other, everything's on fire mode. There's a scene where, as her dad, Castor Troy, grabs her, holds her close, has a gun, and licks her ear. And this is when it's impossible to ignore that this is sexual energy. And that's the scene in which she collapses in her mom's arms after escaping and says, what planet am I on?
Well, first she stabs him.
Oh, that's right. She stabs him.
She like saves the day with the knife that he gives her, and she stabs him which was great.
Right. It's totally great. Yeah. So I do think it's funny, though, at the end of the movie, Sean Archer gets everything he wants. He gets his wife back. He gets to kill the bad guy. He gets his son back, kind of, because his son had died. But remember, Castor Troy had a son. And he ends up adopting Castor Troy's son, which again speaks to the CPS adoption rhetoric, where it's like we view children as commodities to go to parents who want children. And Sean Archer is a parent who wanted a child. His son died, and he has this really creepy scene, maybe where he's high on ecstasy at like all the terrorist international, I don't know, criminal rings house. And he sees
the coolest loft in downtown Los Angeles that you've ever seen.
It's so cool. And there's also a line where Dietrich is just like, my pad is getting fucked up while everything's getting shot, you know? And I always think that. I'm like, if this happened at my house, I would be so mad. I'd be like, no, not the couch. Yeah, but there's like this moment where it's unclear. He's maybe been drugged. He's partying. Who knows? And he sees Castor Troy's son, and he has this whole meltdown moment where he like mistakes him for his son. So in the end, when we see that he ends up getting to adopt him, it's really disturbing to me. So I'm like, you can't just steal a random child and be like, my son again. My son's back from the dead now, and here he is. But that's kind of how the movie treats it. So he gets everything he wants. He gets his wife back. He saves the day. He gets his son kind of back miraculously in some weird way. He gets a stand-in son. And yes, he gets the all-American pretty blonde daughter that he wished he had all along. She's no longer goth. She's come around. And this is supposed to be, I think, symbolic of healing her daddy issues, right? And this is something we hear all the time. Oh, you dress weird. You've got daddy issues. And this is really leaned into. But something I think is interesting is how much it showcases that mainstream American society, there's a very narrow expectation of how you are to conduct yourself. And if you do not conduct yourself within this narrow expectation, you are a pariah. And this really makes me think of the MoMA long leash program.
What's that?
Oh, so the CIA covertly funded abstract expressionist art for years because it was part of this Cold War technique where, you know, coming out of the USSR, we had these very practical, realistic paintings of workers doing labor. We had people harvesting wheat. We had people, I don't know, doing farming. So the CIA was like, to challenge this, we are going to fund abstract expressionist art. Like Jackson Pollock was unknowingly a CIA asset. He was on the long leash program with the CIA, which basically just meant there were so many steps in between him and the CIA. He was on such a long leash. He did not know that he was being paid by the CIA to make this art.
Damn.
And the reason the CIA did this, they worked in conjunction with the New York MoMA to spread this agenda. They did these international showcases of abstract expressionist art. The idea was that capitalism gives you so much freedom that only something as unique as abstract expressionist art, that could only come from a system of capitalism. And to juxtapose it against the USSR's very lifelike, realistic paintings of people doing labor was like, look at how little creativity there exists under socialism. No freedom of expression. Not like here in the United States under capitalism, where you can throw paint at a canvas and everybody agrees it's so special. So I just think that that's interesting in the context of Jamie, because what we see is when the second Jamie tries to express herself and do something different, it's kind of the opposite of that narrative the CIA was trying to push with the abstract expressionist art. We see that you're actually not allowed to do that under capitalism because as a girl, as a woman, her identity is commodified. Her value is in being pretty, attractive, commonplace, and palatable to be consumed by society. And the second she stops playing into that, she is no longer American, basically. We lose her as the all-American girl next door. So to be an American woman is to be palatable enough to be consumed as an object. And that is so in stark contrast to what the CIA spent billions of dollars and decades trying to tell the world life was like under capitalism. It was supposed to be so free under capitalism, but we see it's not.
Wow. That's so funny. We actually just kind of talked about this briefly. We did the movie Cradle Will Rock with historian Harvey Kay, and that movie is about, you know, the government sponsorship of art and then also like the private, like, you know, private wealthy business interests sponsoring art. And the whole thing is that like their belief is that art is getting too political. And in one scene in the movie, they say, well, we'll fund the next generation of artists. What should we focus on? And one of them says abstract. So I think that's like part of this long leash program, or at least it wasn't, they didn't mention the CIA in the movie, but that's so interesting.
That's so fascinating.
And also the fact that like abstract art doesn't come along with those inherent politics that, you know, more realistic art at that time was showing, like people doing labor and the like. Damn, wow. Thank you for that. That's a good little nugget. I'm going to keep that.
Yeah, I think also like Jackson Pollock himself was a socialist. So to know that his art was vague enough to be interpreted however was convenient by the federal government, I think is very interesting about abstract work.
Well, I have a question for you both. I was wondering as I was watching this, who would you face off with? If there was someone whose face you would take, but it has to be like your worst enemy. You're like not a vanity face-off situation. It's we're going to war. I'm snatching your body.
I mean, the most obvious and literal one for me would be my mother, but I think that's too it's too cliche. I think I would go after that rich dad, poor dad guy. He's like, I got my sights on him. I really do not like that guy. I want to walk around in his body, see what's going on over there, really check it out, you know?
Maybe I'd go with like a Ben Shapiro and just see how much of his business I could destroy in as short amount of time as possible.
But like the reverse you have to remember is Ben Shapiro is Frank Capello.
So what am I worried about? That he's not going to have sex with anyone well? Like, that's my biggest risk with Ben Shapiro.
Do you really want that getting out, though, about it? I mean, he could take you down socially.
That's true.
That's something
That's
to
true.
be aware of.
It means he would be the co-host of Movies versus Capitalism.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
What about you?
I mean, I'd have to go, like, I guess I'd have to go... I'm trying to think where I would have the most effect. Would it be Elon Musk? And then Elon would be me? It's so confusing. I love Face Off.
And he'd run the podcast to the ground.
The new hosts of the show are Elon Musk and Ben Shapiro.
And then my mom just shows up sometimes to guest with you guys, to be the guest. You get my
It could be fun to face off Taylor Swift. We were talking about Taylor a lot. That could be like a fun. I mean, there'd be a lot you could do. A lot of cultural, maybe financial damage, and then they would take you off. That I feel like you'd be raked away real quick.
Talk about a long leash program asset potentially there.
Ooh.
Ooh. Not to put on my conspiracy brain hat, but I'm gonna call it now.
And I feel like Taylor would like being me.
Yeah.
Now that we're back into like the face/off part of this movie, there is something else that this movie does, and I don't have like a super coherent thought around it, but it does this thing that happens in 80s, 90s action movies where like the two lead men are so alpha, they're so hetero, and there's so much testosterone that it is homoerotic. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. Oh, yeah.
Like, these two men are obsessed with one another. And then there's also the added layer of they are literally entering one another's skin. And there's just so many sexual overtones, undertones throughout the whole movie. And it's just kind of that thing where it's like, you can only get manly to the point where then you are in fact gay at some point. You know, like there's only so much testosterone that a movie can handle before, I don't know, could it awaken something? Is it something that you think would actually turn men off to, you know, questioning within themselves if they're having maybe homoerotic thoughts? Or is this just like emblematic of a time where, you know, just like being the most man is just not even considered anything that could even be close to homoerotic?
Well, I just think it's the most representative of just like, yeah, just not being able to come out and say it.
Yes. It
makes me think about, well, Margaret Cho's also in this movie, which I love. I think is great. She's one of my favorites. But then I can't remember what, I think it's like 2013. She has this whole stand-up special where she talks about John Travolta being so gay that he's like Oscar Wilde gay, and kind of, you know, it was like a big thing of like outing John Travolta. But I'm just like, yeah, well, she was on Face Off with him. She knows what she's talking about. I mean, we all know what she's talking about.
Yeah. I think this is really interesting though. Like it's like the Twitter trend that's like, fellas, is it gay too? And then it's just like the most heterosexual thing ever. Like, there was one that was like somebody talking about Rihanna being pregnant on the cover of a magazine with like her her dude like walking behind her, and this guy tweeted it and was just like, seems kind of fruity to be walking behind your woman like that, you know? And somebody was like, fellas, is it gay to get Rihanna pregnant? You know, but I think it's like this masculine obsession with how you're perceived by other men. It's like women don't even enter your mind as an audience. And that goes along with the patriarchal overtones of the movie. Like, the women don't exist. They are objects to be maneuvered, manipulated, controlled. They are assets. They are prizes to be won. And really, yeah, this is just performance of these men for each other, this singular obsession. And we never learn when this obsession started. We don't know why Castor Troy tried to assassinate Sean Archer in the beginning of the movie. That's never explained. For all we know, this vendetta has been going on like time immemorial, right? Like, it's just always been like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and Sean Archer and Castor Troy, and they this idea of good and evil is replicated throughout the movie too. The final fight scene starts in a church, and Castor Troy even references it, like good and evil constantly in conflict throughout history. So they almost are these like apocryphal kind of deities, just intended elemental to just intended to be obsessed with each other from the moment of creation until one of them dies. But yeah, it is very, very much speaks to like the male gaze, right? The men are performing for each other at all times, and the women are incidental bystanders or byproducts. Even Margaret Cho's line is got a little anal fixation there, right? She says this line to her boss when he starts acting different. And she says, "Sir, did you just have a surgery?" And he turns around and he's like, "Oh, what?" You know, because he's had his face taken off, for anybody not keeping up, right? So he's like, "Oh no, is it possible Margaret Cho knows I've had my face taken off?" But no. She goes, "Did you get the stick surgically removed from your ass?" You know? So it is this very... there is like a homoerotic element to the men's singular obsession with each other, I think, yeah.
And then the movie also, like, paints this through the score and through the cinematography as like it's operatic. Like, it's so, like we're saying, it's like two gods facing off against one another. That's how epic and large scale and how much reverberations this singular conflict between these two men will have on the entire world.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the reason, like, it really works because I do think John Woo he talks about intending it for it to be a comedy, and that this is in the world of like Mad TV. These characters are mad, and I love that intentionality is there. It really feels satirical of all of these things in a way that sometimes the films that intend for satire in this way but stay in this realm grounded don't achieve. But it is like all the heightened elements are just so crucial to making that very clear. It's great. I do want to touch on one thing that will haunt me forever: the amount of face touching. And it's like,
oh wow, yeah,
it's like Sean Archer's families, which is kind of interesting because I feel like it hit on this thing where you have like some families have just like their own secret, like this is how our family communicates, and in their family, they run their fingers down each other's face.
Yeah, I've seen this called the waterfall when people are talking about it. They're like, well, yeah, and then he does the waterfall, and then so this is a very unique thing. Yes.
It's very, and like, where did that start?
There's so much lore. I want a prequel so desperately to this movie. I want to know about Castor and Pollux' childhood. I want their upbringing. Yeah, I want to know about why the Archer family started doing the face waterfall. I will say, when I was single, if I got drunk enough at a bar, I would just go up to strangers and face waterfall them, and the first person who was like, face off, I'd be like, we're talking now. Yeah, so it can be an effective pickup line if utilized correctly, I will say. Just, but you are touching a lot of strangers' faces.
See, I'm one to touch a face. I am one, though, if you touched my face, I would be so upset. I don't like my face touched, but I like to waterfall other people's faces.
Right. Okay.
I'm definitely going to start doing this as a straight guy in New York City. Just start walking up to different women and touching their face. I think this will probably go well for me. Yeah,
I think that's going to go really well.
Good.
Yeah. I think that, what's the saying? You might not be everyone's cup of tea, but you're someone's shot of whiskey. Like, It's gonna be wrong 99% of the time, but one person is gonna go, oh, face off, and then that's the love story for the ages. That's how it goes.
That's true.
Violating personal space and boundaries whenever possible in the pursuit of love.
On that exact note, I did want to mention, and we've talked about it briefly, but just like the sexual politics of this movie and the way that women are objectified throughout it entirely, both on a narrative level and on a physical level. And just want to mention, there's just a lot of scenes in this movie of women being physically harassed, sexually harassed. I mean, what happens to Joan Allen's character when Castor Troy as Sean Archer sleeps with her, you know, that's rape right there. And so there's a lot of stuff in this movie that would not and should not go into like the 2024 version of it. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's very of a time, and a lot of this stuff would not and should not fly today.
Yeah, I think that even back then, I do remember it being shocking. Like, I remember being a child and seeing Castor Troy tell somebody working on an airplane, you know, I could eat a peach for hours. And I was like, what? And I watched a lot of these types of movies. I watched, like I said, Con Air was a big one in the house growing up. Any movie with explosions, I was into. Even like the weird Cold War era, like Hunt for Red October. You know, I'm like, yeah, I loved this as a kid. So even when this movie came out, though, I think that they were intentionally trying to make Castor Troy so vile, you know. But the most interesting thing is that the only place they succeeded in making him just absolutely disgusting is in his relationship with women, because everywhere else where they tried to make him blasphemous as the priest, they tried to make him cruel and callous as the criminal, they tried to make him maybe North Korean. I'm still not sure about the North Korea tie. Like, I still can't figure that out. But yeah, the thing that really did land is in his treatment of women. I remember being very shocked the first time I saw it. And there's a scene where, you know, he sexually harasses this woman on an airplane. It turns out she's an undercover FBI agent. He shoots her in the head and she falls to the ground on the tarmac as his plane's attempting to take off. And I remember that being shocking even when I was a child, just how callous and how cold the treatment of women were. So I wonder if it's a necessary part of making the audience hate Castor Troy, because it actually is, to me, the only effective thing that makes him not the anti-hero is his treatment of women. But if you took all of that away, he's frankly too likable.
Yeah.
You know?
That's really true. You're absolutely right.
He ends up being fun. You know, fun, likable guy who just wants to blow up LA. And even when they present that's his goal, to blow up LA, it is like a joke, an aside, where it's like, oh, who cares? LA, they're going to get what they deserve. And, you know, the audience for this, I can only imagine, is like mainstream America outside of LA. I think they're supposed to relate to that. They're supposed to be like, yeah, fuck LA. Who cares about LA? You know? So I think that the misogyny is a crucial tool. It's maybe the only tool in making us effectively view him as a villain.
But we should give them a little bit more credit. They weren't just trying to blow up LA. They were trying to kill 3 Supreme Court justices. That was the main plan, because that's what was going to be going on in the LA Convention Center.
And that begs to question, like, why?
There's a political motivation there. And that's the thing that's just kind of skipped over. And, you know, it's like we're coming off the tail end of these Cold War era movies. Part of me wonders if the Cold War was still going on when the script was conceptualized, right? So we have to have this villain. And I think cinema for so long had been lazy with the villain arc. The villain was just USSR. It was the communists. The communists were the villain. The USSR was the villain. Anything, you almost didn't even have to come up with a why if you just made the enemy the communists. The communists will do anything. You don't need to explain why. So when you see that, you know, by the time this movie comes out, it almost feels like it's written like with a lazy Cold War trope, but the USSR doesn't exist anymore. So that makes me think that that's why the North Korea line is thrown in there, because they're like, we'll just pick some commies, I guess. We need some new commies to throw in here. And then you don't have to explain, like, well, why is Castor Troy trying to blow up Supreme Court? You know, like, we don't need that explanation. It's just supposed to be taken in the American watcher's mind that, like, of course they'd want to do that because they're the bad guys, and the bad guys associated with communism. We don't need to really understand the depths of their political endeavors or the reasons.
Totally. I mean, I think that's exactly it.
There's also something interesting I'm realizing now, in that, like, the way that political groups, especially international political groups, are painted in American media as like, they're anti-American, they're anti-democratic, they're just trying to destroy us, but like usually have some sort of legitimate grievance, especially with US imperialism. But Castor Troy is just a white male American terrorist, and his political leaning seems to just be, I'm just here for the lulz. I'm just here just to fuck some shit up. And he's sort of afforded the privilege of just being this sort of apolitical white male American who's like, I'm not doing terrorism to take down the US state or the US like surveillance state or intelligence state. I'm just doing it because honestly, it's fucking fun, bro.
Yeah, that's something he says over and over again. His only motivation for any of this is that it's fun. And then one time his brother brings up, well, and we get $10 million. And he's like, yeah, love that 10 million. But you're like, from whom? For what? Like, how? Where are we coming from this? Who's giving you the $10 million? And that's the thing where I'm like, I've seen this movie so many times that I still don't understand what the motivation of the Troy brothers was. Like I said, that throwaway line of the $10 million, the throwaway line about North Korea, which also very interesting, the North Korea thing. They're like, Pollock says, oh, you're late. You probably had trouble with the casing on the bomb because it's poorly made North Korean garbage. And Castor Troy defends it. He's like, no, fit like a glove. It was perfect. So we have just like, so Castor Troy, I think, loves North Korea. I'm like not quite sure. So yeah, we have these vague references, and that's all we get to go on for his motivation. But over and over again, the thing that's actually harped on is just, that he's having a good time. He's having so much fun doing this. Oh, I also think that this could be a critique of grind culture.
Oh,
okay. Oh,
tell
yes.
me more.
Yes.
So just this idea that Sean Archer is so committed to his job that he neglects to live his life. So
Yes.
you could view it that he's singularly focused on Castor Troy, but beyond Castor Troy, I think he is singularly focused on his work to the extent that it destroys his life. And his wife, interestingly, is a doctor. She has a very intense job, this very high-powered job, but we do not see her overcommitting to her job quite the same way Sean Archer is. So I think that there is an element of this where we see that living for your work, right, takes you away from your family. It takes you away from the things that matter most to you.
From your face touching.
From being able to touch everybody's faces all the time. To touch your goth daughter's face. Exactly. So I just thought that was like an interesting observation, that there appears to be some critique of Sean Archer being so invested in his work.
Yeah. Sean Archer lives to work. Castor Troy works to live.
Works to live, and he lives well.
He does.
Yes. Okay, so this is the part where we will move on to giving this film its very due awards. So the first award is Best Politics. Now this goes to the character with the best politics in the movie, and we can each award someone. Yeah, wow. Best politics in Face Off.
I think maybe it's Eve Archer, Joan Allen's character. There's no one else. I don't know if she has discernible politics. I don't know if anyone has discernible politics in this movie. I'm not going to pick anyone in the FBI. I'm probably not going to pick the international terrorist group. So I guess that leaves me with Joan Allen. Or maybe the daughter. Because you know what? The daughter...
Yeah.
Jamie was definitely my vote. Because specifically, she pushes back against the narratives of patriarchy that are thrown her way constantly. Everything is kind of told, it's your fault. You know, she gets made fun of at school for how she dresses. She kind of defends herself, and her dad in the opening scene is like, well, yeah, obviously look at the way you're dressed, right? And she says, we'll never ask my side of the story. Like, hello.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually, I think, has the best politics, because she's able to say that, just being different doesn't mean you're asking for negative attention. And then later on, when she is assaulted by the boy, she knows she did not deserve that, right? And even when her fake dad, Castor Troy, as Sean Archer says, the line about dressing up like Halloween and ghouls try to get in your pants, she doesn't seem to be like, oh, you're right. She's like, no. Like, her face is like, I hate that. So I do think she has the best politics.
I think she even says, she's like, how is this my fault? She has a line right after that ghouls line where she's like, how could this possibly be my fault?
Yeah.
Yes. So I definitely, she is my vote as well for best politics in the movie. She might be a little feminist icon.
Yeah, I think I'll throw in one other just to have another contender. I would say Ivan Dubov, who Chris Bauer plays, who is the guy in prison who they say
His buddy that he helps break him out with. Yeah.
yeah, and he's getting like totally fried. They're just like frying him to bits in the next room. The wardens of the prison are, and he helps get this guy out who he essentially didn't. What was that line? It's so great. He's like, why does he hate me?
There's like the sandwich with the wife and the sister.
Yeah, he's like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
you had a sex sandwich. I loved that line. You had a
Classic sex sandwich.
I was like, also the writing is, oh, I love that
Fantastic.
sex sandwich. I'm going to say that all the time. So he has a sex sandwich, and like, despite the sex sandwich, there's a deep moment of solidarity where he's like, we have to get out of here. And I also loved that. So there was this one detail in the prison where they're taunting them with videos of nature, and they're like, it's like they want us to riot. They're waiting, and you feel the potential, and that's just so fascinating that you're like, this FBI is going to have to incite a riot and going to have to become comrades with all of these prisoners. So again, don't know much beyond that, but
I think that's a good one, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really does come to bat for his brethren in the prison. That's a good one.
It's true. Well, this next one we might have some more contenders for. Our next award is Worst Politics. Goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie. I actually have a good one for this. I think it's the prison warden. We talked a little bit about him briefly, played by John Carroll Lynch, one of the best character actors out there. As soon as I get to the prison, he says, your ass is mine. Geneva Convention doesn't exist. We can do whatever we want with you in here. During the first fight, he purposely does not break up the fight and wants Sean Archer as Castor Troy to keep beating the shit out of the other inmate. And when he stops, he's like, I'm the one who stops the fight. So clearly this guy like enjoys watching the prisoners fight one another, and is just doing like Gestapo tactics inside of this prison, this like black box prison that no one knows about, where he just has full reign to do whatever he wants. Yeah, so
I was going to vote for Sean Archer, but you definitely won me over here. The Sean Archer thing, the politics I was thinking of is just like, trying to take Sasha's son from her, trying that technique. I'm like, this is just so evil to me. Or,
yeah,
the statement about not caring about the Fourth Amendment, which is unreasonable search and seizure, that kind of thing. So he was my initial vote, but no, I think you're right. I think because he goes on a journey, I think he grows, because by the end of it, he's telling Sasha, like, I'm never going to mess with you again. Like, I understand you. And he takes in their kids. So I think that, yeah, probably the prison warden. You're right.
I guess I'm the tiebreaker.
there's no real winner, Like, these are fake awards. We can do whatever we want.
Wait, what are you talking about? I've been busy making these awards, Frank, shipping them out.
What? With our production budget? Oh, no.
Okay, yeah, it's the warden. Give it to the warden. All right, our last and final award is Best Supporting / Spinoff. Goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about.
Oh, this is so easy to me. It's Pollux Troy.
Oh, yeah.
Hands down, Pollux Troy is the most interesting character in this movie to me. I said wanting a prequel. I would love to watch a prequel about the Troy brothers. Like, if that was a movie about like their childhood up to how they become these international terrorists or whatever. But Pollux Troy's character just seems like a person who has had like the rough end of the deal his whole life, right? I definitely picked up on him as being autistic coded, but there's something going on where he's experiencing ableism in the world. Like I said, we know he's medicated. We know his big brother ties his shoes for him. He's just like a really interesting character to me, who's just kind of treated as an aside. He's a prop for Castor Troy, but I think that he is one of the most complicated characters that we kind of encounter. He's not a total pushover. He fights with his brother sometimes, like all siblings fight with their brothers. He also lives vicariously through his brother, because we get the idea that he doesn't have that charisma that his brother has. So he lives vicariously through Castor's sexual kind of exploits and conquering. And to me, he's always been the most interesting character. I regret to inform everybody that when I was a child, I had a crush on his character, which does not speak well about my taste in dating. But I always have been fascinated.
I mean, I had a crush on his character watching it now.
That's a great pitch. I've got a working title for this Troy Brothers prequel, and it's Brother / Hood. And there's something in their past, something in their childhood where like one of them was forced to wear a hood, while they were being beaten or tortured or abused by their father, and the other brother had to watch. So it's Brother / Hood. is the name.
Oh,
I've got
wow.
it. Castor. Okay, so Pollux Troy has sensory issues, so he always wears a hoodie with the hood up, and he's bullied for it.
Ooh,
And his
yeah.
brother gets so over it one day that he puts on his brother's hoodie with the hood up and just goes and
Oh,
defends his brother and
wow.
takes out all the bullies.
That's
so
good.
everybody
That's
thinks
good.
it's
like
Pollux.
already a
Yeah.
face off. I love that. That's
Damn,
brilliant.
this is gonna write itself. I think this is really.
I
good
think
stuff.
we're gonna get rich. I think we're really gonna become millionaires.
Well,
Just
this
waiting
should be
for the check
the
now.
movie, because when I was researching, was rumors that there was going to be Face Off 2 in the works. And
Please,
But-
and
but
please
I
let's
don't
get
think it would
Travolta and
be-
Cage back right now.
I don't
Like,
think that was the plan, and I think they wanted to make it like a women-focused Face Off. I would be worried that it would not. That part of the brilliance of it is just like the '90s of it. I would be
Sure.
worried to see what it would be. So I'm here for this prequel we're
The
pitching.
prequel is the way to go, I think.
The
I've
prequel
really
is
been
the way
wanting
to
it
go.
my whole life. Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm on board with this. The only I was gonna say I'd watch more of the just like the international terrorist syndicate, family community.
Totally.
But this could get folded into Brother/Hood. I think we're talking.
You know,
It's the same
Dietrich
story
and
we're telling.
Sasha. Yeah, Dietrich and Sasha are interesting too because they're a family dynamic as well. We got a brother with the Troy brothers, and then we got Dietrich and Sasha. We got a brother-sister. We got a lot of sibling bonds in a criminal family. That is interesting to explore, actually. I'll take that one too.
Yeah.
I'll order that one
Yeah.
too. I'll take both of them.
Okay. Oh, wow, we got 2 pilots greenlit already.
Wow.
Hell yeah. Wow, Madeline, this was awesome. I honestly, I came in having some ideas of the politics of this movie, but you really,
Yeah, you brought it.
You had it. This was great.
I've had 30 years to think about it. So it's really in there.
So before we wrap, the last thing we like to ask our guest is, how do you practice your anti-capitalist values in your everyday life? And it could be anything from a practice you engage in to an organization you work with. I know you've already spoken about, your literal business that you run. But is there anything else that comes to mind?
Well, my favorite thing that I do is my podcast. I don't know if that sounds like a self-plug, but we take a look at the kind
Plug it
of
up.
international effects of U.S. imperialism. We do deep dives on domestic issues that have been exacerbated by capitalism. Our most recent episode was about the 1877 railroad strikes, where communists took over St. Louis for 4 days, I believe. So I think that
Very cool.
I feel like I'm a storyteller, and that's the best way I can contribute, is to tell people stories that maybe history wants them not to remember. So that's what I try to do on my podcast anyway.
That's fantastic. What is the name of your podcast again? We'll make sure to link it.
It's Pick Me Up, I'm Scared.
Pick me up, I'm scared. Madeline, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for choosing this truly batshit, but yet absolutely amazing film for us to watch.
Thank you guys. This was very, very fun.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our premium episodes, you can go to mvcpod.com to subscribe to our Patreon.
For next week's movie, we will be watching Mike Judge's 2006 dystopian comedy, Idiocracy.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.